Welcome into the Locked On Knicks podcast. Gavin, Shaw, and Alex Wolf back with you to tell you if Tom Thibodeau's ready to get weird. Will the Knicks experiment a little bit more this year? We'll tell you what that means, what it could entail next on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, what's up, guys? You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs wind down. The sports stop sportsing like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. I want to thank you for experimenting with us here at Locked On Knicks and making us your first listen today and every day. If you want to become an everyday or make that experiment a permanent part of your life, be sure to subscribe to YouTube, hit that notifications bell, and never miss an episode on the video side of things, while also hitting the auto download function on your favorite podcast platform of choice, so you always have us with you on the go. But who's talking to you? I'm Gavin Shaw, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. He's Alex Wolf, editor-in-chief of the Strickland, the greatest Knicks website in the whole wide world. And we are wrapping up our mailbag with a series of 3 questions from Knicks Will Rise at Knicks Will Rise. They start off with, any chance Tibbs surprises us and prioritizes experimentation? Alex, I thought this was a great question. I'm super excited to get into it. I'm also super excited to hear what you have to say, because to me, this is going to define whether the Knicks have a legit chance at winning a championship or not this season.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think if I was going to just boil it down into a simple yes or no answer, I would say maybe. I think I'm kind of this. I'm of 2 schools of thought. One is that Tibbs, with a full strength roster, likes to, I mean, I kind of said this in our last episode, he likes to keep things how he likes them, like he's a very particular dude. And so he likes having guys that can pretty much fill in at every position, and know like which position they're going to go in to, who they're going in for, have a rough idea of how the rotation is going to go day in and day out. And so for that reason, like now that they've re-signed Precious Achiuwa, I wonder if maybe he's kind of settled in and is like, okay, great. Now I know that Precious comes in for Mitch, and, we'll run some combination of OG and Hart at the 4 behind Julius Randle. And then, Dante can play the 2 and the 3, and Deuce can play the 2 and the 1. And, that's pretty much it. Like that'll be more or less the rotation right there. But there's another part of me that thinks, because the Knicks didn't do a little more than getting Precious to fill that backup 5 spot, that maybe sort of similar to what they did last year, where they said, hey, you like having a true 4 behind Julius Randle? Well, that's tough. You get Josh Hart, and that's that. And, we were kind of talking before the season, being like, having similar conversations. If you went back to last year, this same time, we probably were having similar type of conversations where we were saying, oh, without Obi Toppin, what are they going to do? They're not like, is Josh Hart ready to be a full-time 4? What's going to happen there? Like, is Dante, like, he plays a position that they're kind of stacked at, with like the guard and wing spot, and like, well, how many minutes is he going to find, whatever. And we had all these worries, and then proved to be for nothing. Like, all those guys played fantastic, and, were playoff performers and everything else. And, Tibbs just kind of played the hand he was dealt, and ultimately found some good stuff along the way. And, the Knicks managed to build a really solid team, and have really solid sub patterns and everything else. So I would love to see if he's more willing to do Julius and OG at the 4-5, and then have whatever combo of the guards and wings out there, like Brunson, Bridges, Hart, Brunson, Bridges, DiVincenzo, Brunson, Deuce, Bridges, something like that. I mean, I think that any of those guys, if you put them with those 2 at the 4-5, you could run and then still not lose too much on rebounds with Julius out there, and, hopefully not lose too much on rim protection with OG out there, and have a fun time scoring lots of points, hopefully, while also not giving up too much on defense. So that's what I hope he goes to. But I'm curious to hear what you think too about whether Tibbs will be a little more experimental like that, without his hand being forced by injuries and stuff like that.
Yeah, I kind of think he will be, because there were some signs last year that he was trending that way. And look, anyone in a long marriage knows I'm not in a long marriage, but from what I've heard, like over time, you have to keep things fresh. You have to start mixing it up. Tom Thibodeau and the Knicks, with this 3-year contract, they're in a long marriage. It goes all the way back to the mid '90s. It goes all the way back to when Tibbs was a boy. That sounds weird, but anyways, he has shown more and more of a willingness to mix things up, like each and every year. And I think that trend continues. And I understand like the inclination to be like, all right, as he gets into like his late 60s, and also like as this team is just better, like generally like necessity is kind of right the birthplace of invention. Usually like there's going to be less necessity during the regular season. The Knicks can win a lot of games, keeping things meat and potatoes for the most part. But I hope that doesn't stop him from mixing up and getting weird. I don't think it did last year, because I think he knows that while the Knicks baseline is higher than ever, their ceiling is also higher than ever. There's a chance to win a championship here, but to do it, they're not the Celtics. They don't have overwhelmingly the best roster, overwhelmingly the best starting five in the league. Like, you have to figure things out. And he started heading that direction by playing OG Anunoby at the 5 in the playoffs. And if you believe Fred Katz of The Athletic, of course, one of the best Knicks reporters out there, that was something that Tom Thibodeau was planning on doing, planning on testing out during the regular season. It just didn't happen because Anunoby had that elbow injury, then had that setback, and he never really got a chance to get in a rhythm and have an opportunity to do that. I think there's a bunch of different ways they can do it. We're going to get into a little bit more next segment, but of course, like just from a team-wide perspective, you can mix it up a little bit more on defense. You can use a more switch-heavy scheme when Precious Achiuwa is in the game. I think he doesn't give you the stylistic diversity. I wanted a backup 5 if the Knicks weren't going to have Hartenstein back, which was someone that can shoot the basketball. Maybe they'll acquire that down the road. He does give you stylistic diversity in that he's easily the most switchable center on the roster, allows you to play some different coverages. And Tibbs, I think, was actually pretty good about leaning into that, especially in the regular season when Precious was in the game. I think knowing Precious now for a year, having that under his belt, like he'll continue to go further and further that direction. Especially like when Brunson's off the floor, and I'm hoping there's even more time off the floor, just finding ways to empower different guys, letting Deuce, Dante, Mikal, Randall, and OG initiate some offense and kind of test the limits of their game. What that looks like, again, I'm going to get into it next segment a little more when we have a similar question. And to me, maybe the most important one is testing out Mitchell Robinson's capabilities. Obviously, like at a certain point, he is who he is. He's 26 years old. This is his 7th year in the league, 6th or 7th year in the league already. And I'm hoping that they use him in dribble handoffs a little bit. They use him to screen away from the ball. And look, we've been asking like for years, Alex, our summer podcasts were a lot of like, let Mitch cook, unlock point Mitch, let him shoot threes like he does during the summer. We know that's not going to happen, but you can let him do some Isaiah Hartenstein-y things at center, because I still think like it's the single toughest thing that Tom Thibodeau is going to have to figure out. Like how do you generate just like a couple inches of extra space when Mitchell Robinson's on the floor, getting him off the ball, like using him as a screener, like doing what teams across the league are starting to do with their rim-bound big men to make them a threat, even if they can't shoot, even if they don't really have a diverse skill set. And if you just like force Mitch into getting those reps all throughout the offseason, whenever you can throughout the regular season, I think that'll pay some major dividends once you get into the playoffs.
Yeah, Gavin, that's a lot to chew on. And, Mitch's role, I think, is going to be, the balance of Mitch and Precious and how that winds up shaking out, plus the balance of OG at the 5, like just how the Knicks handle just the 5 position in general, with how that position is growing in the NBA, or the role is expanding, becoming more important. I feel like lately with having a multi-tool player there, the Knicks finding that balance this year with more of a traditional style rim protecting big man in Mitch, a sort of mobile but also not particularly good at shooting, and also not the best rim protector in Precious, and then someone who's clearly undersized but very valuable in many other ways, including shooting, in OG Anunoby, if not your ideal guy that you would start at center or something. It's going to be an interesting song and dance, one that we could continue talking about in just a second when we continue talking through how much the Knicks should be experimenting versus how much they should just be going with what works and trying to vie for a high seed this coming season.
First, I wanted to tell you guys about our friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer by tuning into some Olympic basketball, Alex. You know, it's a little bit more interesting when you have some money on the games, and Friday is loaded with 4 games. I'll take you rapid fire through my picks. I think Australia I'm taking Australia minus 5.5 against Greece. I think they run through Giannis and company. Canada, Spain. Canada's a 10-point favorite. I think that ends up being closer than a 10-point game. Spain is just always really tough to play in international tournaments. Germany, France. Germany is a 3-point favorite. I think Germany wins by more than 3. They've looked like the much better side so far. The United States, 31.5-point favorites against Puerto Rico. I have a feeling the U.S. slips up, and that game is a little closer. We very rarely see the United States win by the margins they should. So you can head over to FanDuel.com and join me there. And remember that FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, we are back on Locked On Knicks to answer what is a similar second question from Knicks Will Rise at Knicks Will Rise, but I take it in a little bit of a different direction, Alex. He wants to know, if you were Tibbs, how would you prioritize vying for the number 1 seed versus experimenting with all the puzzle pieces? And he uses examples of like Randall at the 5 or like an all Villanova lineup. Let's split this into 2 parts, because I kind of took this as like, 1, like the question at face value, 2, all right, like what does experimentation look like? And I kind of went into in the last question what experimentation looks like at the team level, but I kind of want to get into what experimentation looks like at the individual level a little bit more thoroughly. But Alex, like just in general, like what do you think about that balance between like going for the 1 seed, potentially having the whole Eastern Conference at home like they did last year, versus prioritizing like trying everything out, but I think even more importantly, getting into the postseason totally healthy, which obviously the Knicks weren't able to do last year. And it's tough to argue that's because Tibbs was playing guys too many minutes, but I do think they could have prioritized that more by the same token.
Yeah, it's tough because the injuries that happen, like the OG one is something that happened before he got to the Knicks.
Yeah.
And then just had to be addressed, so what are you going to do about that? It's not really something that's in your control at that time. The Randall one, total freak injury. I mean, he's had really bad injury luck, and then he's had 2 fairly freaky injuries. Like, he doesn't have an injury history per se. It's just he had a really badly turned ankle, which was just from landing on someone's foot, which unfortunately can happen to anyone, the year prior to this past year. And then, getting undercut and separating your shoulder. Like, what are you going to do about that? Like, you're just trying to make a play, and it would have been safe if not for the fact that in transition, he got undercut the way that he did. And, then had to catch himself and separate his shoulder and wasn't able to come back. So, that sort of led to like Tibbs only then had so many players that he thought he could trust at that point. Eventually we did see like an Alec Burks redeem himself late in the season in the second round of the playoffs, and Bojan Bogdanovic figure his stuff out right before getting hurt, right as he was earning Tibbs's trust. So it's just, I don't know, it felt very snake bitten this past year. And unfortunately, like, I feel like those sort of things, you can't really do anything about that. Like, I like the Knicks and by the time you look at it at the end of the season, even the Knicks only had 1 player in the top 15 in minutes per game in the NBA. And if Julius Randle didn't apply for the qualifiers, but he would have been the second one because he and Brunson averaged the exact same amount of minutes per game. But otherwise, they did not have a ton of guys that were getting tons and tons of minutes, even considering, how much Dante and Josh Hart had to play to, supplement everybody else that was injured. But I think when it comes down to like number 1 seed versus experimenting, I don't, you have this written as your first bullet point in our notes, so I won't spoil it too much, but you say, I don't know if they're mutually exclusive. And I agree. I don't think they're mutually exclusive either. I think that if Tibbs just kind of keeps going the way that he was when the team was healthy last year, then guys won't be playing too many minutes. They'll be playing just the right amount of minutes that they want to be playing. And we did see, to his credit, like when given a medical, order, to say, hey, Isaiah Hartenstein can't play more than like 30 minutes in a game, and that's really pushing it. He adhered to that and did it really well. So I'm not too worried about that. I do think that if if he experiments some, I think that you could do that. They just need to do it against the worst teams, like they're going to blow some teams out this year. So use the third and fourth quarter in a blowout to figure these things out and experiment. Do what normal teams do and use garbage time to do that instead of coming out with your same lineups in the second half and not trying to experiment with anything until like the fourth quarter, like with 3 minutes left or whatever. I think that's the key to me. But what do you think as far as the balance and then maybe some of the things you'd be looking to experiment?
Yeah, I guess I'd even take it a step further. Like I think they could do it against the great teams in the NBA. You can try to close a game with OG Anunoby / Julius Randle playing center, because I do think that's going to be their best lineup. But I don't think it's going to take rocket science or just tons and tons of reps for that to be their best lineup. I think from game one, that might be their best lineup with all the shooting that's going to be on the floor, all the IQ on the floor, Anunoby and Bridges like covering things up, making up for the lack of size on that end. Again, it's going to take like real commitment from Julius Randle, which we're going to get into. Another version he could commit offensively to really running and just being in the best shape of his career to make that lineup work defensively. But I don't know, to me, like that can work from day one and start steamrolling teams. If you want to go with the example that Knicks will rise, say, like, and play the four Nova guys together, like, great. To me, like that work, like four Nova guys and either Precious or Mitch or Randall, like that works from day one. Like that, like I don't think it's super duper complicated. Like this team is ultra deep, and outside of the center position, like playing backups is not really going to kill you. Obviously, like you take Brunson off the floor, you're inherently a different team, but you have enough depth where you can survive that for 16 minutes a game. We'll see like what the minutes totals actually look like, but like this team has the depth to supplement individually. Like I think a lot of times when you hear experimentation, you think about like a coach like strategically doing certain things. I think just as big of a part of experimentation is enabling like individual guys to actually put into practice what they worked on over the offseason and stuff that might not be their strength from day one. And to me, this is the stuff that might actually lose you some games, but I think the aggregate is worth it. So I just put like one or two things for each guy. I think this is something, Alex, to maybe down the road in the depths this summer to do a full episode on. But like for me, like for Brunson, I think it's about shooting deeper threes more consistently. It's something we saw him start to incorporate last year. And as the season got on, as his workload got higher and higher, I think he just didn't have the legs for it anymore. I think that's something that if he has as a weapon come postseason, it's just going to make scoring much easier for him. And it'll open up things for an offense that otherwise like the gears could get clogged a little bit. Dante, I want to see him continue to just work on getting all the way to the rim, continue to work on his in-between game. Would be nice if he had like a little bit of a pull-up to his game, because you just want to see him be able to be an effective scorer on nights he's not shooting the three well, which we saw in the regular season. We didn't see so often in the playoffs. OG, you want him to continue to work on his isolation game, just like we saw the last time he's healthy in game 4 against the Pacers, like having an isolation, having a step back, stealing some of Julius Randle's like short fade package, even a little post game. Again, like the guy's 6'8", 240. Like he is a freaking load. Like, no, he's not LeBron, but just like LeBron at about the same point in his career, like if you're going to switch someone onto Anunoby, like he needs to be able to punish it. He's strong enough. He's skilled enough to do it. Just has to have that confidence. Mitch already mentioned handoffs. Mikal, letting him operate as a primary ball handler for short stretches. Obviously, we've seen like in his Nets tenure, he's not the most efficient guy doing that, but I think it'll help come playoff time where the coverage is tighter, when the stakes are higher, that he is used to like operating under duress with multiple defenders at him. Josh Hart has to keep chucking threes that can't go away, even though the team is better now. Deuce has to continue playing out of pick and roll and leaning into some point guard stuff. The point is, like, I think it's all about peaking in April, or peaking even beyond April, peaking in May, June, maybe even, well, I guess just June now that the schedule's back to normal. But not getting the number 1 seed. I'm okay with that. I'm okay having to play on the road. We saw last year, the Knicks got the 2 seed, and if Milwaukee had won, they would have had literally the toughest path possible. It would have all been at home. I'm not sure if that would have mattered. So that's what I would prioritize.
Yeah, I like all the things you brought up for the various players to try working on. I would say like things that I would want to see experimented with. If you're not really going to play Kolek or Campaign, as like the backup point guard, experiment with different things to do with Deuce and Dante and Hart while they're out there together off the bench. Like they're going to spend a decent amount of time together, maybe with Mikal, maybe with OG, maybe with Julius, and then presumably with Precious. Like try to work some stuff out where, I just create some interesting actions for those three where one of them can bring the ball down, but then maybe not be tasked with setting the whole thing up and get it in someone else's hands quickly, start getting them moving downhill or something, like dribble handoff real quick, something to that effect. I mean, little things like that, especially with Deuce and with Dante, I think that's extra necessary just because. Well, I guess with Hart too. I actually weirdly would say I think Hart in some ways is the most comfortable ball handler of those three. I mean, even if he can't quite do what they can do as far as creating off the dribble, as far as like creating a three off the dribble or something like that, I think as far as a guy that can like break down a defense and get inside, he might actually be the best candidate there out of those three guys. So maybe let him work a little more with playing that sort of like Draymond-ish role where he brings the ball down, gets the offense set up, starts the initial action, and then you look for a Deuce or a Dante, to shoot the ball like a Splash Brother out there, the bench Splash Brothers, I guess. So that could be kind of interesting. And then to shout out one more player that I wouldn't mind setting a goal for, I would say Precious Achua. Maybe just work on it. Would be kind of a weird look, but like if you have him out there with like Julius Randle, for example, have Randle kind of dribble the ball over, get Precious out to the perimeter and do like a quick dribble handoff and get Precious going downhill, able to just kind of shake loose from his center defender. If that guy sticks to him, like I think he's got the speed and the downhill, like the downhill ability to just kind of take a couple dribbles, take some long strides, get inside and finish a dunk on a lot of possessions like that. So maybe just something to try a little bit of. But we have, speaking of Julius, a guy that was kind of conspicuously absent from either of us. We have a interesting question about Julius coming up, as well as a minutes load question to close things out here. So we'll be right back to talk some more Julius Randle. All right, Gavin, we're back in, and another question from Knicks Will Rise here at Knicks Will Rise on Twitter. Wanted to know if Tibbs challenged Randle to assume the short roll action and average a triple-double, would Randle be accepting of it, and how close do you think he would come? So this is one where we sort of we were talking about pre-show. We disagreed a little bit on just how close we think Julius could get to a triple-double if that was sort of his mission. So, but also just the short roll passing, I think would be interesting to see. Him in the pick and roll is not something we've really seen on the Knicks, basically. I mean, it was something that he did a lot in New Orleans his final year before coming to the Knicks, and was actually like 95th percentile or something among bigs that year. Like, is a really good pick and roll finisher and clearly has the passing ability to make some stuff happen there. Maybe this is something that we see more if he's out there with OG at the, with them as the 4-5, maybe then Julius acting as sort of the 5 on offense. Starts working, some pick and roll actions with like Jalen Brunson and, force teams to pick their poison where then Julius can get the ball and either get it going downhill or, out of the short roll, kick it to someone in the corner, or, if someone comes over to try to help, there's all kinds of possibilities there. But where do you stand on that with the short roll stuff? And then ultimately with could Julius come close to averaging a triple-double thing?
Yeah, so just for people at home, because I think sometimes we kind of falsely assume everyone knows what all these terms are. A short roll is essentially what you see Draymond Green on the Warriors doing all the time. So when you set a pick, but instead of like rolling with the intent to like get a dunk at the rim, you're sort of just rolling to the foul line and like going like maybe a little bit short of full speed with the intention to eventually either throw a lob or spray the ball out. So what Knicks Will Rise is asking is like can you trust Julius Randle when Jalen Brunson is trapped in a pick and roll situation like Steph Curry always is on the Warriors, and Brunson is increasingly, and I always think about that quote from Mike Brown at the Kings where he said, yeah, we trap Brunson more than anyone other than Steph Curry, and Brunson is quickly sort of becoming that guy. Like I always thought of Damian Lillard as kind of like the heir to the throne in that capacity, but as he's declining a little bit and Brunson's becoming more deadly as an ultra deep shooter and someone like you simply just can't leave one-on-one in a mismatch at this point. Like you're seeing more and more doubles. And we saw late in the season, Josh Hart with Julius Randle out, like he was the guy who was picking that apart over and over again. How would Randle thrive in that role? I think really, really well, because as we saw with Hart, like guys are typically wide open. And I think in particular, this is a really crucial distinction for Julius Randle, because Julius, Alex, like he usually lets other teams off the hook in those situations. Like you could double Jalen Brunson and then you can recover because Julius is just so slow and so plotting, because all he wants to do is get the switch. And he's like, yeah, you're in my office now. Welcome to hell. You know what? And he wants to do that whole thing instead of just being quick and decisive. And I think if instead which I think is what Knicks Will Rise is saying. Like, if Randall could be convinced or challenged to do this, like, I think he could rack up monster assist numbers this year because he's an excellent passer. And as a defender, you have to make a decision whether, like, if you're the big defender, you have to say either, all right, I'm either going to come off Mitchell Robinson, stop Julius Randle, or he's going to rampage all the way to the rim and score. But if I come off him, he can throw a lob to Mitch. Hey, someone else help me. All right, I'm going to come off the corner. Wait, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, Dante DiVincenzo are like 3 of the 5 best corner 3-point shooters in the league. If you go quickly, you're putting defenses in a situation where they absolutely have to pick their poison, and that poison is really, really potent. So where we're disagreeing is I think the upper limit of what that realistically looks like on the Knicks is that he averages something like 7 assists per game. Domantas Sabonis, who is just one of the best big man passers to ever play this game, put up 8 assists last year, and that was sort of as the fulcrum of the Kings offense. Like most possessions were running through him. I just don't think Randall's ever going to be that with Jalen Brunson on this roster, even if teams are doubling him more than ever. I still think Jalen Brunson's going to be the number one guy, and I think Randall's going to have too many possessions where he slows things down and kind of tries to control the ball. I do think if he really, really embraced this, he could get up to something like 7, maybe 7.5 assists a game. I don't think he could get higher than that, and therefore I don't think he could ever average a triple-double, though I think he would have an incredible season. It would be a lot of fun to see him embrace this, and I think it's huge for the Knicks that he does embrace this.
Yeah, I'll just go and say I think the main reason it would be difficult for him to average a triple-double, and I agree, I don't think it would happen, but I do think that he would maybe get a smidge closer than what you think, is just because Jalen Brunson is going to be handling the ball so much. But even with them having their roles sort of how they were this past year, where Brunson was handling the ball, much more obviously, and Randall was relied on less as like as like the initiator, he still averaged 5 assists per game. So if they're then utilizing him in that short role with all those shooters around, there's a world where I could see him averaging somewhere between 8 and 8.5 assists per game. The thing that I'll say is that I do think that if he starts passing out of the short role and being relied on more as, a Draymond-esque, guy that's going to be like sort of be Julius Randle and Isaiah Hartenstein packaged into one. Because obviously we saw iHeart do well out of the short roll at times last year and just be a really good passer out of the post. Like, so if they sort of challenge Julius to take on both those roles, like, hey, be the guy that you could be with the ball in your hands, but also be a pick and roll man sometimes and pass out of the short roll, take advantage of all the shooters around here and everything else. I could see him maybe getting to like 8.5 per game. The main thing that I could see is setting a new single season triple doubles record for the Knicks, which he currently is tied for. Well, he's tied for, what is that? Tied for 4th, I guess, if you look at it this way. Clyde Frazier did it 8 times in 68-69. Michael Ray Richardson had 2 seasons where he had 7 triple doubles, and then Josh Hart, Julius Randle, and Richie Guerin shared the 4th spot there, tied for 4th. Josh Hart this past season, Julius in 20-21, and Richie Guerin all the way back in 61-62. I don't think it would be a stretch to say that Julius could have, like, if he was healthy for, let's just say 75 out of 82 games or something like that, I don't think it would be unreasonable to think he could get 15 triple doubles in that time, just because there would be a lot of opportunity for him to cross double digits in the assist category, which I think would be the only one holding him back, because I think he's going to have more opportunities for rebounds this year, because I actually think that Mitchell Robinson will create more rebounding opportunities for Julius, and that he's sort of made a career of being the best box out guy, especially for defensive boards. Like, he'll just kind of set that really hard box out and let Julius or someone else get the rebound and get started in transition. So I think Julius will get plenty of opportunities for that. And then scoring, there's no doubt in my mind he'll be a close to 20 point per game scorer again. Maybe if he focuses more on distributing, maybe he becomes a guy that averages like 17, 12, and 8 or something like that, 8.5. And I could realistically see that happening. And even though that would be one of the lowest scoring seasons of this point of his career, it would definitely be the lowest scoring season at this point of his career. Could still be a giant success if he's able to do that and distribute in that way. So that's kind of where I stand with the triple double thing. I wouldn't see him averaging one, but I could see him setting the new Knicks record pretty easily.
Yeah, I think my final point there is just that it's harder to do Isaiah Hartenstein stuff if Mitchell Robinson's also on the floor. Like Hartenstein never had to deal with a center, just packed at the rim. Like if the more you get Randall with 4 shooters, like you could put that assist number up and up and up, and I'd keep buying it. Like just more of that. All right, let's finish up with this. Again, Knicks will rise. Shout out to you. 4 great questions. Thanks for carrying this show. And they want to know if there's any chance Tibbs limits players when the roster is healthy to 32 minutes per game in order to manage starters' workloads and find enough minutes for 6 through 9 and maybe even 10 guys. Alex, I don't mind this at all. I don't know if it's ultra realistic. I do think like I had like in my mock-up that I posted here a couple of times, I had Brunson at 36 minutes. I think I had Randall at like 34, 35 minutes. So I don't have them going way above that. Obviously, even last year, they didn't go way above that. Like, but you pointed out Brunson only playing 35 and a half minutes a season ago makes me think like I might even be a little bit high at 36 because like, why would he play more minutes this year? But getting Brunson down to 32, that I just don't see it happening because I think whenever there's a close game, he's going to be playing close to 40, especially against the best teams in the league. I think Tibbs, like at the end of the day, like I've been saying with my preferences, I think what's going to happen is like Tibbs is going to try his darndest to win every single regular season game. But what do you think it looks like? Do you think there's a chance like he's really egalitarian and tries to make sure there are no issues and protects Jalen Brunson's long-term health?
I guess it just depends like how many injuries they end up dealing with. Hopefully none. If there's like no injuries and they're really committed to having Deuce be involved, then maybe there's a world where nobody averages more than 32 to 33 minutes per game. I don't know that, especially for like a Brunson, he's not going to set a limit on him, certainly. So, if there's a game where nothing's working for anyone else except for Jalen Brunson and he's cooking, scoring the ball, he's not going to like pull him early in the third quarter and then, like pull his beginning of the second half shift early so that then he could get the requisite amount of rest to come in for the final 10 minutes of the fourth or something. Like he's just going to be like, no, let's win this game. He's going to play 42 today. And there are going to be some games that happen like that. That said, like just because of the fact that you have this team that didn't have Mikal Bridges last year, and Bridges came over for a guy that really didn't average much in the way of minutes. I mean, he's going to be another high minute getter. OG, if he stays healthy, will be another high minute getter. Josh Hart and Dante DiVincenzo could probably start on many teams around the league, and they will be getting pretty high minutes off the bench, which I think then will limit how much like Julius ends up playing and how much Brunson ends up playing to a degree, because you'll want to kind of make sure that everybody gets some touches and gets to get in and have decent shifts and everything. So I honestly, if we look at the minutes per game at the end of next season and nobody's over 32, it wouldn't really shock me, but I also find it to be unlikely. I think Brunson in particular, maybe Julius has his minutes scale back because of how much Hart emerged last year, that they want to find more minutes for him. I think they will try to protect OG a little bit and, maybe keep him around 30 minutes a game, especially because you have Bridges who can do some similar stuff on the defensive end. If you're looking like just guard the other team's best wing for stretches without the two of them on the floor, that's still doable now. So, I think really the only guy that is giving me pause there is Brunson, who I think will still average 34 to 35 minutes a game. But again, if they're really committed to Deuce McBride and they want to get him out there for 15 minutes a game or something, then that probably means that Brunson ends up playing like 32 to 33, which would be totally fine.
Yeah, I'm with that. I think it'd be a good thing. We'll see if Tibbs can actually do it. Come on, it's time to experiment. We'll be experimenting with not doing a podcast for 24 hours, but when we come back, we have a really fun concept for you, taking the over or under, or more so saying like which Knicks stats will go up and down next year. Tune into that tomorrow on Locked On Knicks.